everyone. You know what I love? I love baseball. Baseball's amazing, isn't it? It's a fun sport where, you swing a bat, you get to throw a ball, and I love baseball. Yeah. I mentioned it before a ton on this channel. So if you don't already know it from the million times I pointed out, it's my all-time favorite sport. We all have that favorite sport of ours. Some would say football, some say soccer, some say basketball, some say video games. Well, I say baseball, mainly since I've had a big childhood with it. I grew up with it, and to this day, I still find lots of enjoyment to it. I like to stick with it because, it's just one of those things you like to stick to with your childhood. And so that's what I do. Now, I also talked a lot about baseball movies. I've seen, of course, a ton of baseball films, so naturally it makes sense that there's a lot out there that I've seen. What if I made a top 10 list of my favorite baseball movies? So I haven't done that before. To honor the summer, It's good old summertime, so baseball time, man. Why don't I do a top 10 list sharing my favorite baseball films? Films that reflect the sport, share it in a different way. They're not going to be all about the same thing, These aren't all going to be stories of a team that sucks and gets good. Most of them probably will be, but it's mostly just going to be movies that reflect on the sport in general. It doesn't have to just be a underdog story. It can be a story just that has baseball in it. So that's pretty much the simplest rules it could get. And if you're a fan of baseball, this is probably the only kind of people that can watch this list. If you're not someone who loves baseball as much as I do, you probably won't care too much about this list. Anyway, let's get started. Starting off, this is Major League. This film, starring Charlie Sheen and other actors I'm not too familiar with. This movie I've gone through multiple takes with. At first, I thought it was just plain old decent, basic story, nothing really that special. Watching it again, I will admit it definitely has a nice edge to it. I mean, you gotta admit, this is a fun trio. These three do have a fun thing going forward and everything. And granted, I guess I was just a little concerned because it is an underdog story, the idea of three fellas who have to get better at the game or whatever. That's really all I can think about it. It's not one of those movies I can remember entirely because it is a little out there, but still, it's a baseball story. It's nice. It's a nice one, and if you're a fan of these actors, you should really enjoy this movie. Overall, maybe it's not top tier, especially compared to the other ones on this list, but in terms of baseball, it works well enough. So, yeah, I guess I can give it that credit, It's not, it's not something I probably would revisit every year for the sake of baseball, but if I'm talking about baseball movies, this is definitely a good one to bring up. I have talked a lot about Fever Pitch before. I mentioned how this is a simple rom-com story with baseball tied to it, and how it definitely does a good job at tying it in, as does better than I could imagine. The idea of a man who's obsessed with the Boston Red Sox falls in love with a businesswoman. They essentially have a hard time getting along because he's too obsessed with the season, and she just wants to be not famous. She wants to be successful, exactly. And I do like sort of where the story goes. Because at first, like again, I was probably just gonna see this as plain decent at best, nothing too special. Especially seeing how I'm not really a big Jimmy Fallon fan. But as it went on, I did actually start to grow into liking it a little more. Had a bit more of a better thing going for it, and yeah, I do think that the whole romance you get from this isn't perfect, but it works nicely enough. I mean, I could definitely relate to a story about a man who's obsessed with a team. That's something all baseball fans can relate to. And I do kind of like how they handle that part of the story. So, even if Jimmy Fallon isn't my cup of tea, this movie works still pretty well. Okay, now let's talk about someone who is funny. Basketball is what happens when you get the guy who directed Naked Gun and collide him with the people behind one of the funniest shows of all time, South Park. So yeah, this is what we got. We got Trey Parker and Matt Stone in a film that David Zucker directed. That seems like a comedy match made in heaven. It sucks because neither Trey, Matt, or Zucker really acknowledge this film as much. They probably don't really have much of a positive opinion on it. However, I think it's pretty fun. It's a fun story about these two weirdos who come up with a new sport, which is just a combination of baseball and basketball. Yeah, and it becomes big. Eventually, becomes this big new major leagues series, and yeah, it's basically from there. It's just them succeeding at trying to. They try to succeed with the sport, and from there you get the kind of comedy that comes from either the David Zucker route, where it's silly nonsense spoof moments like Naked Gun had, or then you of course got the dirty, inappropriate moments that you would see from South Park. And again, it seems like both of those combined would make for such an exciting comedy, right? Well, maybe not. This wasn't definitely not really that exciting. It definitely was not something Trey Parker and Matt enjoy nowadays. But I still think it's pretty good. And also, you might be wondering why does this count if it's not entirely baseball? It's basketball. Well, considering basketball isn't officially a sport um, in real life, when I feel like after this movie it could have really took off in general, it basically is just you can either see it as a baseball movie or a basketball movie. You know, you can't really say it's a basketball movie because I don't really think basketball has really took off after this film came out. I like to wonder though, what if it did? What if after this movie we got actual basketball games? Because I think I'm kind of surprised that it wasn't influenced enough by this film. Maybe it was. I just don't remember any of it. But still, nah. It seems like a fun sport to work for more too. But I guess since Trey and Matt don't really have much of a positive side on this movie, there isn't much to it. All right, now let's talk about a biopic baseball film. 42. This is the story of a famous baseball player. Famous baseball player that I gotta really try to remember. Okay, he's a famous baseball player that played for the Dodgers back in the 30s and 40s, and he is portrayed in this movie as being the one who is a baseball legend. You know, I'm gonna get the name eventually. Maybe later in this video I will find the name out, but let's just talk about what the story is. Yeah, it's a biopic for a baseball player. That's quite an interesting take. There's tons of baseball stories. So this is basically just one of those baseball stories, but I'm told Jackie Robinson. That's right. That's who it is. Robinson. This is the story of Jackie Robinson, the famous Dodgers player back in the 40s, and what he accomplished. And yeah, it's just a baseball story, but a true one. So there's that. I mean, the performances are nice, and you definitely can like something that goes for an actual story. But at the same time, considering it took me a while to remember who the name was because I'm stupid, I guess I can't say that this was top tier, one of the best sports stories ever. It worked nicely. I definitely could buy into it. It had an emotion. It had the emotions. It had all that. Maybe just not anything else that make it top memorable. The Sandlot. We all know what the Sandlot is. The story of a bunch of kids who work as a team. They do a lot of stuff together, especially play baseball. That's what they do. They enjoy baseball so much they call themselves a group of the Sandlots. And essentially, the story is a new kid joins the group, and he's a noob at baseball. So they have to teach him, show him the ropes of how baseball works. And once he learns to it, then he finally gets to join them. And after that, the story just goes in front to being them doing random stuff, going to the pool, playing baseball, going to a theme park, playing baseball, and eventually losing a ball to a giant crazy dog. That becomes the third and final act. And yeah, that's what you get from this movie. A bunch of randomness with these people. Normally, I would complain for being so inconsistent, and the whole opening with the kid getting bullied or whatever, not knowing much about baseball, I will admit that was a little annoying to watch. But aside from that, the movie is still fun. It's got good heart, it's got good comedy, and you can still enjoy it if you're a young baseball fan like I am. So people like me are the ones who can enjoy this movie. We're the target audience. And here we have another true story baseball film, Moneyball. Instead of focusing on a baseball player, this is the story of a baseball stadium and the struggles it goes through. We all know how not as popular the Oakland Athletics are, or maybe just to me. They're not even Oakland Athletics anymore. If you've caught up with what the MLB has said, then you know that they are moving their stadium somewhere else. So they're no longer Oakland. They're still the Athletics, just not Oakland Athletics. Anyway, this film tells the story of this stadium. Its struggles, success, and we got Brad Pitt in it. He's always there to add drama. Brad Pitt's a fun actor to put in your movies, and with him, I gotta admit, this actually movie actually was a lot more enjoyable with him in it. I hate to admit, I actually think that Brad Pitt is one reasons why this movie is so fun. He has such a fun performance in this. He's the guy who takes his work seriously, but at the same time is also quite cocky for a few bits. I really like seeing him pulled off like that in this film. It's fun. Really, it ties in. There's other fun actors in this too, like Jonah Hill or Philip Hoffman, even. But Brad Pitt, in my opinion, is the reason this movie is as fun as it is. It's obviously just meant to be a biopic telling the story of financial struggles and what a baseball stadium can go through. But other than that, I think that Brad Pitt's attitude in this film is worth a watch. Even if you're not a fan of baseball. If you're a fan of film, then you probably know how Brad Pitt is as an actor. So this probably is a good example of his work. A League of Their Own. You know what's more fun than seeing a bunch of men play baseball? How about women playing baseball? In my world, we call it softball, but turns out women's baseball is not something that's just softball. Apparently, there really is women's baseball out there. I haven't seen much of it. I've mostly just gotten used to that being softball. But anyway, this movie portrays the world of baseball from women in a story where a bunch of women have their own baseball team that's going to need to be led by the coach, good old Tom Hanks. And yeah, with Tom Hanks in the movie, you're going to enjoy it. These women in this movie, they're fine, I guess. They're not too annoying. I mean, granted, I will admit they were a tad irritating, but for the most part, I still had enough fun with the film. The fun seeing the nice story of what they go through, the struggles of being a team, the struggles of working as a team, even though they're women, and they do things like crying when there's no crying in baseball. We all know that line. It's fun to see. You got a lot of it to it with Tom Hanks's attitude and the woman's attitude. There's a good contradiction between it all, and it nicely shows how it doesn't shy too much away. It doesn't just make the woman powerful. I'll admit that. That's probably a good thing about this movie. Could very easily have made it where the guys are like, "Oh, you're a woman, you can't play baseball," but the women are like badasses and they prove everyone wrong. But instead, they take the actual approach of showing that these women aren't terrible at baseball. They just, they need training. They can't just go in blind, assuming that they can do it because women have rights. It's letting us know that we can't just use we have rights to mean that we can achieve anything. Everyone's got to train more. I think this movie proves a good example of that. It proves that there's not always a good privilege to who you are. You can't just have a diverse attitude to work your way doing anything. You can't be a woman and be like, I'm a woman, I can do this. It still takes training. That's a fun thing to see from this movie. Now Kevin Costner's baseball story, For Love of the Game. I remember how fun I had watching this film. This is the story of one man playing for the Detroit Tigers. He essentially goes through a whole series of games where he plays the Tigers, and natural. Well, no, he doesn't play he is part of the team, and most of the time he has to go against the Yankees. They play the Yankees for multiple games, and throughout the whole movie, I was just rooting for the Yankees because I know we're supposed to focus on Costner's character being a pitcher and all, but I'm a Yankees fan, so throughout this entire movie, I just was like, "Go Yankees!" So when they had their big resolution and won, I'm like, "Dang it, they lost." I had fun doing that. Anyway, yeah, really, you're just getting another underdog story. But hey, this one does have a lot of fun to it. You get the fun, emotional chemistry with Costner and Kelly Preston. They make a good duo. And I do admit, out of all the underdog baseball stories we've seen, I think this one really does work very nicely. It's got a good heart to it. The whole baseball portion is good. There's a lot of it in the movie. Most of it is an actual game being played, tied in with the connection. Usually, I would complain about that, but for a movie that is able to make it show us both the game as well as some of its own dramatic moments, mix them together, I like how it did that. I like that. I like how they sort of combined the actual baseball game with a story. To me, that's just fun to see. Ah, yes, the Bad News Bears. This story is great. A bunch of children who do not are not good at baseball because their coach is slacky. But he realizes he needs to get better at coaching them, so he does so, and they get better, start to succeed. And it gets even more interesting when a woman joins the group, and she kind of helps add pride and good heart to the team. And I think honestly that's really the best way to describe this movie. You have a coach and a girl team up for the sake of having a team succeed. I like that. I like how the movie does that. It kind of goes through different sides to baseball. We don't focus on the players this time. We focus on the coach and the people who are there to support them, because the support is needed just as much as the game itself. It's like a fun 70s comedy that really does have a good meaning to it. I heard that Quentin Tarantino's a big fan of this movie, so honestly, I agree with him. This movie is great. It got a good story to it. These kids are fun. The comedy's fun. You got a good Maffio as the coach. He's fun. It's overall just a fun story that I think really does reflect itself as one of the peak baseball stories. It's pretty much a prime example of baseball in cinema. The only thing that beats it is a film I've of course praised before, Field of Dreams. This movie, in my opinion, is near perfect. I'm sorry, but this movie really hit me the best. I think it's just because of how sincere it is with how ridiculous the story is. It's a story of a man who gets to meet a bunch of baseball ghosts play in a field that he creates. On paper, that sounds like the dumbest crap ever, but this movie was able to make so much dumb stuff actually emotional. And I love a movie that can do that. I love how it's able to tie in a baseball story that isn't just about someone who has to get good at the game. It's a story that shows a man who can really succeed in life for having a love of baseball. It's a family story about, finding your dream, meeting the people you never thought you could meet. And I think that this movie succeeds amazingly at it. Because again, it could have very easily have just ended up being such a silly, weird family comedy, but this time around, everything is done really well. You actually get emotional, you actually get invested, or at least I do. And because I'm able to get emotional and invested in a silly story like this, that's enough for me to know this movie's great, top tier. And I to this day I still think it is. Even if it's not a great or nice baseball story, even if it's not the whole a guy succeeds at baseball, it's still just so inspiring and it really hits me in the feels of base. It's like a love letter to baseball fans. I feel like everyone knows that. This movie is a love letter to baseball fans. That seems like a good fact, right? Right? It should be, yeah. Yeah, if you're a baseball fan, then this movie is made for you. It's made for all baseball lovers out there. I feel like if you want to watch a movie that has to do with baseball, should be your top pick.